I can hear you good.
Okay. It means it's working. I'm I'm going to kind of modify this, or I'm battling allergies that are just making me cough. So I can't blame it on COVID. So I'm just going to have to work through this. So you're going to get a pretty good email of the different documents of what we'll be going over today. So then once you go through them, if you still have questions, then feel free to hit me up with an email or a text or a call. Does that make sense?
That sounds good. That sounds great.
Okay. Can you see? And I'm not a big fan of these Zoom meetings. Can you see this resource notes and introduction to REO?
Yes.
Okay, good. So basically, a HUD home is just an REO. It's just a situation where somebody had an FHA loan and they defaulted, and then the lender pushed it through foreclosure, and the lender can decide, just like they can on any other foreclosure, do they want to keep it and try to sell it and get their money out, or they want to just turn it over to, and if it's an FHA loan, they would turn it over to HUD, not to FHA, because FHA by law doesn't have a provision to accept any assets that way. So it goes kind of over their head directly into HUD, just like a commercial, or a conventional loan would go into Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and they all have their, they all have their websites. I think in this document, it kind of shows you Fannie Mae is Home Path, Freddie Mac is Home Steps, and then FHA HUD is HUDHomestore.com. So it's pretty easy to go to their website. Their website is the horse's mouth. Sometimes the MLS is slow to catch up to that, but if you want to find REOs in the MLS, there's this additional acceptance condition where you can check mark these, bank-owned REO, HUD, bank-owned REO, deed recorded. Basically, why there's two different sections there is sometimes lenders, they're always trying to save a buck. They will go ahead and foreclose and get the property at sheriff's sale. They'll get a deed, but they won't record it because they only want to pay their attorney one time to go down and record the deed. So they'll record the deed that shows they own it, and then they'll immediately record the deed that shows that they sold it out on the open market. So let me switch to another one. This is kind of a 4-page scenario or not a scenario, a summary of this other 100 and some page document that Sage puts out on how to buy a HUD home. So I'm just going to kind of go through this as easily as I can. And I don't want to just sit here and read to you, so I don't like to do that. So I'm going to just jump over, and we're going to get right into the HUD Home Store. That's the best place to learn about HUD homes. Does that sound cool with everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay, so if you look in what I have done is, if you just go to HUDHomestore.com, this is the screen you're going to see, and then you just pick the state that you want. You can also put the state down here. When I first got involved with these HUD homes, which was about 10 years ago, at any given time in Franklin County, there was about 375 to 425 HUD homes in just Franklin County alone. As we know, that market has really dried up. And matter of fact, right now, there are no HUD homes in Franklin County, and there's really nothing even close. You can kind of go down through here. So Urbana is probably the closest one. So what happens is, when you got a buyer, it's just like any other deal. The changes that HUD has done, if you've ever heard any horror stories, oh, it's so hard to sell a HUD home, you got to do all this and all that. It's really changed quite a bit. It is very easy now. They do electronic signatures. They fill out the contract for you. That's that. Don't let a HUD home scare you away because some agent that did one 7-8 years ago had a horrible time with it, which you probably did. So I'm just going to pick this one in Urbana. So you just click on that, and it's going to take you to the property details. And this is what you kind of want to look for up here. This tells you who can bid for it. Okay. So owner occupants, they always get the first whack at it. And then this gets a little tricky. There's a bid submission deadline that is on this line. And then you'll also see a period deadline over here, and they're different dates. That's because this is talking about bid submission, and this is talking about the actual listing. So we're going to go off of this April 4th. It's going to let you know that you have 4 days, 11 hours, and 52 minutes, which usually goes all the way to 11:59 p.m. Central Time. So that's an extra hour that you would get if you're up and about and you want to make a HUD bid. So if we come down here, so if you've got somebody that's interested in this, the first thing you want to do is come in to these addendums, okay? And then what HUD does is, the people that come into the property that physically take care of the property, they're called the field service managers, and they go through and they do this, they call it a HIPR or an HPIR inspection, and they thoroughly go through the house to make sure that the lender that's turning this property over to get their insurance money has met the criteria that that HUD has, that the home has to, the home can't have an active leak. It's got to have handrail, whether it's just temporary 2x4s. I'm sure you've seen that, or loose carpet might be taped down or whatever. But anyway, they go through and they do this really elaborate inspection. And you don't want to have it take the place of your client's inspection. But one thing it does do is, out of that report, it produces this PCR, which stands for Property Condition Report. Can everybody see that here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So what you want to look for down here, it just tells you a summary of what they've seen. Does the HVAC, did it test, and was it functional? On this one, yes. Was the electric supply tested, and was it functional? Yes. Was there any appliances missing? It's no, because the built-in appliances were tested and functional. the stove was missing. But here's the key one here is, was the water supply tested and functional? Okay, here it says yes, pressure test pass. Okay, so once you see that, then the water's, turned off. But that means you could probably just get a regular loan on this property, because you can have all the utilities on for an appraiser to come out. Okay, if that would say fail, then you're looking at either getting a loan with an escrow or like an FHA 203K, which is like a rehab. Commercial also has a rehab loan. Usually this says fail, either because the plumbing was stolen or the pipes got frozen. But this sometimes it does show as passed. Now they go through all these little things here. Now, we had one that the field service managers went through and said the HVAC system failed to perform. So the buyer was a VA buyer on it, and they had to escrow, or they ended up not being able to do the deal because the mechanical system says that it failed. Well, it was a $35 part on the thermostat. Once they replaced the new buyer came in, they replaced that, then everything worked perfectly. So, how many people are familiar with REOs out there?
None at all.
Mute yourself, or do we have the
I'm familiar with REO.
Side? Okay, so why I jump to this report before you even show the property is sometimes, if you know that your buyer can't do anything but just a normal FHA or conventional loan, they can't get into a 203K, they don't have the funds to do escrow. So if you saw this and it said that the pressure test failed, that just helps you save some time, and you don't have to drive all the way out there to show them the property. Okay, there's another addendum that's important here, and that is this listing. And what I recommend you do is either once you have this open, save it to a PDF or print it out, because if you go and you win the bid, this property will disappear off the HUD home store, and you're not going to be able to come back in and pull that property condition report. The other thing that's important too is this property listing disclosure. And what that is a report put out by the FHA inspector or appraiser that appraised the home. And this will come through and tell you some things that you might need to escrow. This says repair, replace drywall and ceilings, repair and replace electrical system, missing breaker in the box. So those are items he's calling out when he does his FHA. We all know FHA appraisers are also inspectors, right, when they go out there. So let me see where that would show that. Okay, so down here where you have the list price of 210 FHA financing, he's saying that you can use FHA financing, but you're going to have to use escrow there. Okay. And while I'm kind of here just to stay here, this listing information is talking about the actual listing, whereas up here, there's talking about the bid deadline. So this was listed on March 26th. And it's exclusive, which means it's for owner occupants. No investors are allowed in there. And that time period will run till the 9th, okay? So, but the initial bid period, they're gonna wait for 5 days here, okay? And collect bids. And then within that 5 days, if there is a bid that's acceptable to HUD, which is usually within 90% of the list price, although people are bidding over on these just like other houses, then they'll go ahead and accept it. If there's not a bid that's acceptable by HUD, then this will say, instead of deadline, it'll just say daily at midnight, okay? So it'll do that every day at midnight until it gets to the 9th. And then once it hits midnight on the 9th, then it's going to roll over. Then all investors or all bidders can bid on it. Okay, so I'm going to kind of jump in. Where'd we go here? Okay, so this is 106 pages, which is going to be in an email to you, so you'll be able to use this for reference. But, excuse me. Again, they talk a lot about the different territories in the United States for HUD homes. You know, that, you know, you can just reference this. It doesn't really matter because, you know, we have one that's for the state of Ohio. Excuse me. Okay, basically what they're saying is, you know, this document here is from, I think, 2016. They've updated it a little bit, but most people are familiar with the HUD homes. You don't get to see that many of them anymore, but, you know, we don't really need to go into this, you know, the intro into HUD. Everybody knows what HUD is. The showing and advertising, the listing brokers, you know, Sage is hired by HUD to do the selling side of these properties, whereas they use a different company to handle the actual physical management of those. And that's what I said earlier with the field service managers. So we're, as a listing broker, we're gonna advertise them just like a regular listing. The only thing that's really key is you're supposed to be there with any time you have a client. You know, the days of giving out lockbox codes are well behind us, and especially with HUD, because if HUD catches anybody in there without the listing or without the buyer agent, that buyer agent, they can get banned from selling HUD homes, probably make a complaint against the local board. So we just don't want to do that. Even after, let's say your client was won the bid and they are in contract, you have to be there every time they're in that property. You can't give them a lockbox code or anything. If HUD catches somebody in there, maybe like trying to do some work, or they're just in there to show their relatives, and you're not in there with them, they'll cancel the contract. And they've even gone where if somebody gets in there a couple days before closing and they want to start painting or something, they'll go ahead, and they get caught, they'll go ahead and they'll cancel the contract. There was a instance here in Central Ohio, a guy scheduled his roofers to go in and put a new roof on it. After he closed, well, his closing got pushed back, but he didn't push back the roofers, so all that work was done, and HUD was aware of it, and they basically said, "Thank you for the roof." They canceled the contract. So I might fly through this a little bit. only because you can go back and read this if you would like. A lot of this I've covered just with talking to you guys. So there's Ohio, we're region 4P. That's really all you need to know. And use binoculars when you're out there looking for these houses. Poor humor, I guess. An NAID number is required for you to be able to sell a HUD home, even as the buyer agent. And what that is a number that that HUD gives a brokerage that means they've registered, they meet the criteria, and they're allowed to participate in the sale of these HUD homes. So if you, excuse me, if you don't know, check with your broker. Most of the brokerages out there these days have one. If you don't wait and say, well, I'll just wait until I have a buyer that wants to buy a HUD home, because that process takes like 8 to 14 months sometimes. So you definitely want to have that taken care of. And speak while we're there, you can go in here, even though you don't have a buyer, you want to go in and register so you're ready to go when you do have a buyer. The time to trying to log in and figure out this HUD home store is not the night of the deadline, and your buyers are wanting to know, why can't we put a bid in? This says 6 to 8 weeks. I've never seen 6 to 8 weeks for getting an NAID number. If your brokerage, some of the smaller brokerages don't have NAID numbers. Usually, if you call around, I've put in some bids for a couple agents that didn't have the NAID number. The problem is, once you put the bid in, then you got to kind of follow the process through. So usually, if it's somebody right here in our brokerage, I'll do it for them, charge them maybe a couple $100. But if you're going outside your brokerage trying to find somebody to do it, sometimes a listing agent will do it for you. Sometimes they're already representing somebody else, and you don't want to be sharing your client's bid, what they want to bid with them. So let me get down to, okay, HUD homes are always sold as is. That means there's no warranties, there's no guarantees. They can be FHA insurable. If they are not, let's say that the work required for the escrow is over $10,000, the FHA appraiser is going to deem it as non-insurable. So they do want, just like any other foreclosure, there's not going to be any liens on it. Your buyer gets to choose the title company, so that's kind of nice. You're using your quality title company to make sure that is the case. Who can buy a HUD home? Anyone that fall into these three categories: owner occupants, investors, and government agencies, and HUD approved nonprofit organizations. Now, I actually had a HUD listing up in, God, I can't remember now. It was up kind of west of Marion, and there was a church that was right next to this beat up old house. And sometimes HUD will put in that it's in the lottery, meaning that only non-investor or nonprofits and government agencies can bid on it. And this one happened to be tagged for that. And I'm thinking, well, that's good. They're a nonprofit, they could bid on it. And it's not that easy, because a nonprofit has to have an NAID number. So they have to already kind of be in the business of buying HUD homes. So they could not. They had to wait until it went to owner occupants. I'm sorry, they had to wait until it went to investors. Well, luckily for them, Prospect, Ohio, that's where this was. And they had to wait for it to go through the owner occupant bid period. And then once investors came up, then they were allowed to bid on it. And of course, they won it. So churches have some kind of insight from above on some of this stuff. So the buyer types, you're going to have to live in the property for 1 year. And you cannot participate in the HUD sales for 2 years after a purchase. Investors, there's no restrictions on quantity. It's a different bidding cycle, which we talked about. They usually they're the last in line for something to be there. Rarely do HUD homes anymore make it to an investor status bidding. There are some special programs with HUD. One of them is the Good Neighbor Next Door, which is for EMTs, firefighters, police, teachers. It's for teachers. If a guy's a custodial worker at a school, he does not qualify for this program. And what they do is they take 50% off of the list price that they have it on the market for. And they only have to put $100 down. What's the catch to all this? Well, it has to be in a designated revitalization area. So most of the time, people that are professionals that qualify for this, they're wanting to live in a little bit nicer area than these revitalization areas, because they have to live in the home for at least 36 months. The buyer nor spouse may have owned title to property in the last 12 months. Bidder nor spouse can have participated in this program before. They must bid 100% of the list price, and then they'll get 50% off of that. Now, every once in a while, there's an area that's down like off of Main Street, just south of Franklin Park, that I believe is still in the revitalization area. And as we know, that area is hot right now. So that if one would come along that's in that area, that would be something that you would want to let your firefighter, EMTs, police, whatever, to bid on it. Now, HUD will not pay you a commission on this. So you're going to have to get a buyer brokerage agreement with your buyer so you can get them to pay you what you feel you need for this. Sometimes they kind of throw it in and out. There's $100 down for owner occupants. And I don't know if it's available right now. Sometimes it says it is, but the best person to check with there is your lender, because the lender is the one that would be participating in that. So, excuse me, get connected. This Sage acquisition, or sageacq.com. That's not a bad website to go to, but really for just looking for houses and what's available, HUD Home Store is where you want to be. Just like you'd go to Home Steps or Home Path for the conventional REOs. Sometimes there's events like this great, fantastic Zoom meeting here today, which I'm not a big fan of these Zoom meetings. So if I'm rushing on it or kind of bouncing around a little bit, it's a little easier when I can see the people that I'm talking to. We usually have this in our training room here at the office. So we talked about creating a bidder account, and we talked about how you can find the properties. So this would be a good page to bookmark or whatever, but this is the financing codes and property condition codes. Okay, so IN is going to be one where nothing needs fixed. It's in great shape. The buyer can just go get a regular FHA loan and move forward on it. The UI is uninsured, and that's going to have to be a conventional loan or cash. Now, the HOA, we already know what that is. F, I think, is, excuse me, floodplain, maybe, flood zone, yeah. And then lead-based paint. And then IE is like that actual example we just looked at, where it can go FHA. It just needs escrow set up to fix a couple things. Now, excuse me. This lead-based paint stabilization, now HUD will, they will just red flag it. They'll just go in, and if it's a house that they feel might have lead-based paint in it, this does not cost anything to your buyer. They'll go in, they'll do an inspection on it, and they'll actually go in and stabilize the property up to $4,000. So if this happens, you want to make sure that your buyer, if they're FHA and they go through this lead-based paint stabilization, and then they switch to excuse me, conventional, then they're all of a sudden going to be responsible for that $2,500, $3,500, whatever, up to $4,000. So you want to make sure that if they're going FHA, they stay FHA. Sorry. Okay, we kind of went through these codes here. And again, you can kind of go back through that and let me know if you have any questions on them. Okay, I'm going to go over this again only because it's pretty important. The different bid periods out there. The first one is lottery round, okay? And you'll see it'll be listed as lottery when you go to the MLS. That is one of those properties where HUD has going to give the local nonprofits and local governments a chance at that property before anybody else can bid on it. In our area here, Columbus, Ohio, I've never seen that actually happen or go down. But I think in different parts of the country, HUD supplies some of the urban municipalities and nonprofits with some generous inventory. Okay, so that's your lottery round. Okay, then the general market listing is what we just saw on that example I showed. Okay, so that is going to be insured or insured with repair escrow. Okay, so this one was IN, and then insured with repair escrow is IE. Okay, and those are 15-day owner occupant exclusives. That's why it said exclusive in that one section, what kind of listing it was. So they're going to do a 10-day accumulated sealed bid. Sometimes they'll shorten that. I don't know why. Sometimes they just pick to shorten that. But it'll go, or let me double check. Maybe I've misread that before. No, they're going 10. I'm sorry. They're going 10 on here. So the list date was the 26th and the bid deadline is the 4th. So there's 10 days. So I misspoke. So after that 10-day accumulated where they let the bids come in, okay, nobody except HUD sees these bids. So the listing agent doesn't see these bids. I don't even think Sage sees it. The computer is the only one seeing it. So again, after that 10-day, then they go and they pull a bid, and if it's acceptable, then they'll go ahead and pick a bid and award the contract. Then they do that 5 days daily. Then on the 16th day, all bidders can come in. Okay, on uninsured, they'll have a 5-day owner occupant exclusive sealed bids, and then all bids just start on the day 6th. Did that make sense to everybody? Okay. Okay, I would suggest just kind of getting into the HUD home store. If you're not registered, go ahead and register, and then just kind of knock around in it so you get used to it. The general public cannot just go online and submit a bid. They have to go through a real estate agent that belongs to a brokerage that has that NAID number. So there's the bid lines here that that you would fill out when you're on there. So let's just go into that. Okay, since I'm already in, okay, I've logged in. So what do I want to do? I want to submit an offer. So I click on that. Okay, you get 15 minutes. It doesn't take that long to do these, but sometimes people get started on it and then they get a phone call, or they got attention deficit like me, and something comes across their phone, and then next thing you know, it's 2 hours later and you go to finish this bid and it locked you out. So on one of the things I'm going to send you today, it has a list of what you're going to need from your buyer to go ahead and do a bid. Okay, so first thing they make you do is make sure you have an NAID number. So I'm going to come in, and you notice here it says the following can submit a bid on the property: a HUD registered selling broker, a HUD registered government agent, or a HUD registered nonprofit. So see how it gives the option here of selling broker. If this was one of those lottery properties, this option would not be on this drop down. Okay, so I used to just have this memorized. So I'm putting in our NAID number. And my real estate license. Yeah, I had my mind blanked on me a couple days ago. I couldn't remember my real estate license to save my life. Okay, so then you click to make sure you're not a robot, and then you got to verify to make sure your NAID's there. Okay, so since it came up, bid submission, everything checked out on my NAID number. Sometimes people, when you have, your real estate license, you update it every 3 years. Okay, well, a lot of people forget to go back into your profile here and show that it's been updated. So if you didn't do that, you're not going to get through that last step we just did, because it's going to show that your real estate license is expired, even though it's not. Okay, so this is real simple. If you just go down through and read this, that's 210. So let's say we're going to put we're just going to bid list price. And then this allows you to do the different types of financing. So we're just going to say repair escrow, because this one had repair escrow. See how it's automatically filled out the commissions. So on HUD, they allow the seller to pay up to 3%. So that's $6,300, right? So then you come down here, then that shows what your net bid to HUD is. It's 191.1. See how this is already filled out? Okay, it's an owner occupant. I always let my buyer's bid be held as a backup bid because it's not binding. And I bet you 20, 25% of my HUD business, we were not the initial bid winner, but ours was in as backup, and we got the house. So especially when there's a lot of agents out there that really don't know what they're doing, and they're not going in and they're not researching that property condition report. There's no plumbing in no copper in the basement. Their lender just sends an appraiser out there. He's like, we got, this doesn't fit the criteria. So then the deal dies and it comes back on the market. So this next item here, this is one of the, like they put on sweepstakes, people that work for HUD, work for Sage, even the appraisers, even real estate agents that work for a listing broker that is a listing approved, a HUD approved listing broker. So if you, like, I couldn't go buy a HUD home, nor could anybody else that's within our brokerage. So then you have to check here. You check no. Selling broker agent, they don't have any ownership interest, just like if it's a LLC or whatever. No. And then you're going to come down here and you're going to need their social security number. Again, I have this on one of those other documents that I'm going to email you. Then you can confirm on, if it's an investor, or I think they still let you go in if it's going to be an individual owner occupant, but you're doing it through an LLC. I think they still let you put an LLC EIN number in there instead of your social. If they don't, then you're going to have to just put it under your social security number. And you fill this out, your address, everything that's required has a red asterisk on it. If there's another purchaser, go ahead and add them on. Then here's where you're going to put in, this is for the title company. So if I just put in Northwest Title, they have all these drop downs. Okay, so there's this is who I use. That it already pre-populated their ID number. Okay, Doug just left, but I put, sorry, Sherry. Then they want to back up. I could put Tedra. This is all pre-populated. So then I just would go to continue, and then it's going to do is the next thing, it's going to give you a summarization of everything. It's not going to do anything yet because I didn't put a buyer or anybody in there. So then when you hit next, it's going to give you, it's the bid still not submitted, but it's all going to be a summary there that's going to, so you can check everything. Make sure you have the right social in there, right phone numbers, everything. Then once you do that, then you hit submit, and then you've actually submitted a bid for your client. And it'll give you a bid acknowledgement number. Excuse me. You want, and there's a button there to print it. You always want to print that so you have that, because you're going to need that, and it's a long number. You're going to need that bid acknowledgement number when if your bid gets selected and put into the contract phase. Okay, commission lines. Sorry. When you're filling out the excuse me, the closing costs on there, that's the only time that the HUD might hold that against your buyer, because they are always looking for the net buyer. So if a buyer bids $100,000, but they want 3% of closing costs paid by HUD, that's only a net of 97,000. So if somebody comes in at 98,000, yeah, it's not the highest bid, but it was the highest net. So HUD would pick that 98,000. That makes sense?
Mhm.
You cannot change the listing broker's commission, but you could change your commission if you wanted to. But we usually don't want to. Okay, then the title companies that have been approved by HUD, they know the drill on all this stuff. So I'm going to kind of skip over that. Excuse me. Now, this is something that has changed over the last 3 or 4 years. It used to be the minimal commission was $1,250. Well, now it's $1,000. And here's where it gets a little tricky. So if a property is listed at 40,000 and a buyer bids 26,000 and it gets accepted, they're only getting 3% of 26,000 because the property has to be listed for $33,501. Okay. If it was listed anything below, then it gets into that 1,000 minimum. Now, HUD does allow for you to have your own buyer agreement, and you're allowed to charge the buyer more commission. It doesn't have to be just what HUD is doing. Now, this is something that they added. If the bid deadline falls on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, or a legal holiday, it kicks over. So like this example here, the bids submitted would be reviewed all the way through Monday, okay? If your buyer, a lot of times I typically just work with referrals and stuff, so I usually know my buyer. So I don't make them get me a earnest money check. But if you're just kind of dealing with somebody you don't really know that well, I would make them give you a certified or money order for the earnest money when you make this bid. Now, let's say you win the bid and something happens to the buyer, he flakes on you or whatever, they just HUD moves on to the next bid. There's no penalty in there for you. Sometimes they do counter offers. That's rare because of the market, and there's not that many houses, HUD homes out there. And the way they do it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but I'll just let you refer to reading this if you even feel the need for that. Okay, now earnest money, this is one of those important pages I would bookmark. Okay, it's $500 for under 50,000. Over 50,000 is $1,000. Okay, and if you're in these 3 areas, it kicks up to 200 or to 2,000. But that we're in 4P, so this doesn't apply to us. Okay, this introducing e-signatures on HUD contracts. It's really just a good read. If you just go through it and follow the instructions, it works very easily. It's kind of intuitive in nature also. Your buyers will need, like any kind of e-signatures, they're going to need 2 different email addresses when they're doing this. Okay, so what happens when your bid is accepted, you'll get a congratulations letter from the actual HUD, which is a P260 platform. Plus you'll get an email from the Sage platform. Plus you'll get an email from the listing broker congratulating you and telling you what you need to do next. So make sure you read all the directions. The only time I've ever seen people get in trouble on doing these HUDs is when they just, you know, we all know those realtors out there where they're too good or too big. They know everything, and you know they're not going to worry about the little details. Well, you better worry about little details on this stuff. But it's easy if you just read the instructions and follow them. So you're going to, once your bid is accepted, then HUD's going to say, okay, take your buyer's pre-approval letter and their earnest money to the listing agent and just give it to them. And then the listing agent, and that earnest money is going to be made payable to the title company they picked. Okay. So it's a little confusing, but you're going to go give a check, a certified or money order made payable to a title company. You're going to go give that to the listing broker. Okay. And then you're going to fill out the information that Sage sends you, do the electronic signatures. I mean, the contract package comes to you and your buyer already filled out. So it's even easier than a regular deal. So then once they sign that and HUD gets it, HUD will review it. There might be a couple items in there that maybe your pre-approval letter doesn't have the HUD case number on it, or it's out of date or whatever. They're very lenient on, once they get that contract package, they are going to work with you. They're going to send you out an email. It's going to say, hey, we need the following things changed on your package. And then they'll give you a couple days. Whatever's on the email, that's what you got to follow. And then you just send that in, and then HUD will go ahead and sign off on the contract. And then when HUD signs off on the contract, HUD will tell that listing broker or listing agent, okay, take that earnest money and deliver it to that title company. So obviously, it used to be you could just take that to the title company right out of the gate. There must have been something that happened, because earnest money was given and maybe deposited and HUD had not accepted the contract. I don't know what it is, but just follow the instructions. You're always, I try to make myself available. The listing agent should also be making themselves available if you run into a snag or you have any questions. But if you're not getting any help from the listing agent, you can always contact me and I'll try to help you the best I can. Again, this is just going through and reading of how all that works. Just talked about all this. Now, sometimes there might need to be an addendum done to a contract, or maybe you have to add a buyer or take a buyer off the deal. You know, you can do that with amendments, but they do take 72 hours to process. And there'll be directions in there, what email address you send that to. Okay, now, on all the HUDs, you have a 15-day due diligence period where they want you to get a home inspection. So you have 15 days to do that. You typically want to have the utilities turned on and put in your buyer's name. During that time period, I think they allow you, it says 48 hours here. I think they might give you up to 4 days, but you want to have that, have that set up so it's done the home inspection's done at the same time the appraiser goes out, so he can see everything on. You know, sometimes people go, well, I don't want to waste money on an appraisal if the home inspection's not done yet. You just gotta pretty much have your buyer pony up, make sure or they're going to risk one of the two things there. A bad home inspection because stuff wasn't on, or a bad appraisal because the stuff wasn't on. Now, a lot of lenders that work with these HUDs, they'll, if you can get 2 of the 3 main utilities on, they'll go ahead and get an appraiser out there, and then they'll just give an estimate for the escrow. So, you know, so let's say the water can't be turned on, but the electric and gas was, so everything else was functional, then they would just want some kind of a dollar amount, like a plumber give you a bid to say, okay, what would it cost to get this water back on? And then they would do it as an escrow. Okay, sometimes there's vandalism on these vacant houses. So if you see anything, you would want to report it to the Philadelphia Home Ownership Center is who we report to. A lot of times they call that the Philadelphia HOC instead of Home Ownership Center. It's just HOC, HOC. So that's where you would send that to. I would let the listing agent also know. Now, if a AC unit is gone, they're not going to put a new AC unit on. They're going to give you some kind of a prorated adjustment to the property. And it you know, it's kind of like when you take tires in, they look at the tread, you know, and they're going to prorate it. So in the HUD contract says that they may do all this. They're not guaranteeing that they'll make any adjustment to a house because of vandalism. So you kind of have to, you know, go through and make sure you check everything. Definitely go through on your way to closing, double check on that everything's still in there, and then go from there. They've been, I shouldn't say that because we're not seeing any HUD homes lately, but I think some of the vandalism has worn down a little bit. Police are getting a little better. They're better securing the houses. This is what I was talking about. Make sure that you're a buyer agent, but HUD calls you a selling agent, okay? They call the listing brokerage the listing agent or listing brokerage. They call the buyer brokerage the selling agent. So your buyers cannot move in. They can't repair anything until after they close. And they're not going to get any keys at closing either. So you're going to have to go back after closing and let the buyer in with the HUD key. And then they'll have to put a new lock on right there and then. You might want to check with the listing agent to make sure they leave the lockbox on so you can get that HUD key to let them in. Okay, this is closing agent items. Now closing, they'll give you 45 days for FHA or conventional, 30 days for cash, and 60 days for 203K. They do extensions, and they'll automatically give you extensions. So they kind of do it based off the price of the house. So this tells you on a $50,000 and up, it's per day is $25, and they only do it in a 15-day increment. So if you need an extension, you're going to have to give them a check for $375,000. Now, if you only use 7 days of that 15 days, they will credit you back. They'll prorate that back. They'll typically grant you an extension without having to pay if you can show that it's the lender's issue and not your buyer's issue. And usually the form that you fill out for an extension allows you to describe what the reason for the slowdown is. And again, lenders that work with HUD deals, they know this. They know the drill. Now, if it's on they've gotten to be where they'll give you, like, if it's an owner occupant, they're going to give you one free extension anyway. And if it's a 203K loan, they're going to give you 2 free extensions. Okay. That just shows you how to cancel a contract. We just talked about pre-close. Now, again, you're dealing with the title company. If they've been approved by HUD, then they know the drill on all this stuff. If you're selling real estate, I'm sure you're lined up with a title company that you work well with and you trust. The same is here. Just make sure that they're approved by HUD. There's some assistant numbers there. Thank you for attending. Again, this is going to come in an email. There's going to be about 5 or 6. Let's see here. Okay, you're going to get that 106-page thing that we just went through. This closing facts is just some more helpful things that if you run into some snags. And then you have the HUD home buying process, the introduction to REO, and required items to bid on a HUD home. That you can just send me, I have some of your emails, but if you just send me, if you did not send me an email, then send it to me. I make sure you get this.
Rob, can I ask you a question about inspections?
Yes.
Will HUD de-winterize the property for inspections?
Well, there's a form you go through with the field service manager, and you fill out that form and you give it to them, and they will come out and do what they need to do.
Okay.
And then sometimes, depending on what time of year is, sometimes it does not need to be winterized. But
so does the buyer have to pay for that?
Just make sure you follow instructions. There's a fee, it's minimal, that the buyer would have to pay.
Okay.
And I'll also, before I email this out, I'll get you the forms that you would see that you would need to provide to the field service manager.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I kind of zipped through this because a lot of this you can read through, because I like to give a little bit of time here for questions, so we're not in a hurry. We got plenty of time here. Or if you got it all, this isn't continuing ed, you can bail out whenever you want. I'm surprised I'm not coughing so bad.
So the buyer chooses their title company, and then they pay for the title insurance policy, right? HUD does not provide an owner's policy.
They, let me pull up, hold on a second. I mean, I used to do probably 10 HUDs a year, maybe. But I don't think I've done one in at least where I had the buyer in 3 years or so.
Gotcha.
But that's a good thing to know the answer to. They were providing, if you went with HUD's approved title company, they were providing it. And then if you went with your own title company, they weren't providing it. And then they just discontinued having their own HUD title companies. But I'll get you the answer to that.
Okay, no worries. You think it's in that giant packet?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
I'll follow up with my title company and I'll get you the answer to that.
That'd be great. Thank you. I've learned a lot.
Well, good. it's hard to cover all of this stuff, especially when there's no inventory out there. I mean,
right.
We just had, we get maybe 2 or 3 HUD home listings a year, whereas before we were doing, 90 to 120 listings.
Wow.
It's one of those things that just, when you do something over and over again, you learn it and it's like old hat. But when you only do something every once in a while, you're never really sure yourself.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's too much other stuff to remember.
Yeah. But if you go in there and just register on the HUD Home Store, and then also register on, if you haven't already, go into Home Path, register on that, and go into Home Steps, register on that, because these REO, we're so used to just going to the MLS. Well, the MLS is not the horse's mouth on these, and there can be some delays. Let's say the listing agent is leaves for 5 or 6 appointments that will take them, back to back to back into 9, 10 o'clock at night. Well, they might have an email from the REO, from HUD or Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or whoever that says, hey, it's in contract. Well, you're not going to see that, and the MLS is not going to show that. But when you go to the Horse's Mouth website, it's going to show that. Now, how's it going to show with HUD? You won't find it on HUD Home Store anymore. It just disappears. I think Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's site, I think it'll just tell you that it's in contract.
Thanks, Rob.
Everybody done?
Yep, thank you.
And then just do I have everybody's email?
I'll shoot you an email to make sure that you have mine.
Okay. And then if you think of anything else, or if you have questions going through all this information, just feel free to shoot me an email.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Have fun, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.